Holy shit, I thought it was hard getting it down to just 10 when I did one of these for Capcom, but wow, Konami used to make a dizzying number of great games. Yes, today the company is now known as one of gaming's great tragedies. They used to be a classic factory, and now they seem almost hostile to their most loyal fans and hardest working creators, aggressively pissing away one of the medium's greatest runs of games, characters, and properties on casino schemes and a general disdain for their own history. But once upon a time, wow, what a legacy. I mean, here's a few of the games that ultimately didn't make the cut. Gyrus, Circus Charlie, Blades of Steel, the Bucky O'Hare games, the original Gradius, the original Contra, Goonies 2, the Goemon games, Super Castlevania, the Tiny Toon series, Sunset Riders, hell, all but one of the original Castlevanias. This was actually painful to whittle down. Anyway, I'm the Game OverThinker, and these are the top 10 best Konami games of all time. Number 10, Rocket Knight Adventures. Any way you slice it, Rocket Knight Adventures and Sparkster are among the best in their field. A whimsical fairy tale atmosphere crossed with sci-fi fantasy craziness for a franchise that somehow didn't quite catch on at the time, but is justly remembered as an all-time classic. Yes, this was Konami doing more or less what everyone else was trying to do at the time, i.e. the overstuffed mascot platformer subgenre, but a standout is a standout, and there's a very good reason why people are still hungry for more Sparkster after all these years. Frankly, I'll take even a just good enough game with a wacky armored rodent hero over modern gaming's endless succession of pouty, poorly shaven white dudes, and Rocket Knight Adventures is way better than good enough. Number 9, Life Force. There are so many shmups in the annals of classic gaming that even the best often get lost in the shuffle, but Konami's Gradius games are some of the all-time greatest, no argument can be made otherwise. However, when it comes to sheer aesthetic innovation, it's this Gradius side project that still stands out from the pack on sheer aesthetic inventiveness alone. Set, depending on which version you played at the time, either inside the body of a gigantic alien or simply within several alien environments that just look like that, Life Force, also known as Salamander, took the rock-solid Gradius gameplay and matched it to some of the most inventive-looking levels ever to be flown through. It's weird, but it's wonderful, a testament to the sense of invention and creativity that define an entire epic of arcade ventures and Konami's signature place within them. Number 8, Dance Dance Revolution. Yes, it's a game. Yes, it's an important one. Yes, it belongs on this list instead of whatever you're about to say should have taken its place. Look, I get it. The massive success of Dance Dance Revolution at a point where Konami's other classic franchises were starting to wane did end up marking the beginning of the end for the company as gamers knew and loved it, ultimately beginning the rapid slide toward a company that pretty much only made DDR to a company that basically just wants to make cheap fodder for Japanese casinos. That's sad, but it can't be allowed to take away from two indisputable facts. Dance Dance Revolution was one of the biggest, most sustained, and widest-reaching phenomenons in gaming history, and Dance Dance Revolution is a ton of fun to play. In the pre-Wii moment where modern gaming was in real danger of sliding back into the old paradigm of muscle atrophy-generating entertainments for reflexively antisocial, DDR had players up and moving in their living rooms, and arcade versions surrounded with cheering crowds of onlookers like something out of the goddamn Last Starfighter. Yeah, sure, it's basically just playing Simon with your feet, but if it's so goddamn simple, how come you didn't think of it, smartass? Number 7, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill was a game that looked at the rest of the post-Resident Evil survival horror genre and said, okay, cool, but what if it was actually scary? When it came to the horror genre, mainstream gaming had gotten very good at recreating the schlocky, blood-splattered nonsense of the gorefest genre and even mimicking the cheap thrills of a good jump scare, but it was Silent Hill that took it upon itself to make a game that was legitimately unnerving, disturbing, and scary on an existential level, and then Part 2 made it all just a little bit better. Yes, there were still monsters and jump scares and a fair share of clunky bits, but the scariest thing in Silent Hill was often just inhabiting a horrifying environment and being profoundly affected not just by thoughts of what was going to happen, but what looked to have already happened, fusing a distinctly Japanese meditation on survivor's guilt with Western influences like the works of H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King. And yes, it goes without saying, we're all sick of Pyramid Head at this point, but damned if he didn't become one of gaming's most iconic nemesis for a very good reason. Number 6, The Simpsons Arcade. I went back and forth on whether or not to include any of Konami's licensed games on this list, but the fact is, when Konami was on fire, they were routinely turning out what other devs might have dismissed as cash grab tie-ins into games as good as their original material. Here's the thing about The Simpsons, though. It was originally aimed at an adult audience, or at least not exclusively the kid audience, that ended up attracting in unprecedented numbers. What's nifty about The Simpsons Arcade game, other than being a fun multiplayer beat-em-up, was that it feels reverse-engineered in exactly the opposite direction, taking the iconography, characters, and settings of the show and reconfiguring it into more conventional good guy versus bad guy cartoon setup. It's just weird enough to be compelling. You can probably chalk a lot of that weirdness up to the decision to turn the franchise over to a Japanese developer that didn't really have a sense of what The Simpsons was actually about, letting the raw data be reinterpreted by designers who didn't have preconceived notions of what it should be. Fighting Mr. Burns in a giant robot suit really isn't something you'd want to see The Simpsons do on the show, outside of maybe the Halloween episodes, but in a game, it was the definition of awesome, Konami style. Number 5. Metal Gear Solid. Auteur game design gets talked up a lot these days, but in truth, even if most Golden Age developers were too keenly aware of the similarity of their station to any other software company salaryman to ever think of themselves as such, the smaller teams and more intimate development schedules of the earlier days were probably closer to the common understanding of the word auteur than the ostensible masterminds of today's bloated AAA behemoths. But Hideo Kojima fit the definition to a T in both eras in all the best and worst ways, and Metal Gear Solid is where he proved it beyond the shadow of a doubt. Gameplay-wise, it's a quasi-futuristic military stealth game upgrading the basic setup of Kojima's original fondly remembered 8-bit cult classic. But onto that framework, Konami's one-time mad genius grafted about a dozen philosophy theses or one pot-fueled overnight dorm room debate worth of batshit wacky ramblings on politics, culture, science, psychology, and warfare in the form of an admirably convoluted storyline that fused modern gaming's available depth with retro gaming's genre-bending innate weirdness, or put another way, it's the old G.I. Joe cartoon but now rated R and 11.5 hours long. There's a reason they don't make them like this anymore, but back when they did, no one was making them better. Number 4. Contra 3: The Alien Wars. How many times did I go back and forth as to whether the original Contra or Part 3 belonged on this list? A lot. A lot of times. The original is iconic, historic, easily the most memorable of the series, and one of the most memorable of all time, and will always be the first set of sounds and images that come to mind for most gamers when the word Contra comes up. But the Alien Wars is the Alien Wars. It's the best Contra game ever, very possibly the best run-and-gun ever made itself, and just a pure audio-visual rush of joy every minute. It's damn near everything that was great about the original Contra blown out into a showcase for just how much action was going to be possible for developers to pump out through the Super Nintendo, and Konami showed up to play with blazing weapons, massive bosses, and levels that used every graphical trick in the book to kick your experience up. And the gameplay somehow was exactly as simple as intuitive as the atmosphere was loud and punishing. The end of the world never looked so good or felt so much fun to play. Number 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time, SNES. Konami was so good at turning licensed tie-ins into legit gaming classics that they even once made a decent brawler out of Cowboys of Moo Mesa. But their masterpiece in that regard will always be their unmatched run of original Ninja Turtles game. With Turtles in Time, they took an already winning formula developed in the original arcade game and blew it out in all the best ways. Better graphics, better animation, new moves, a greater variety of enemies, and the time travel gimmick that allowed for fresh locations like the Old West, dinosaur times, pirate ships, and more. Gamers will argue forever over whether the arcade version or the slightly reworked SNES release was superior. I'll personally give the console version an edge, based purely on the ability to customize the character shading alone and the Mode 7 enemy throwing mechanic. But they're both classics in their own right, and there's a reason why this is often called the greatest arcade brawler of all time. Number 2. Frogger. Yeah, you aren't imagining things. Frogger arcade machines all came stamped as Sega products, but they only distributed it. Frogger was developed by Konami as one of their earliest arcade successes, and as you'd expect from the developer they went on to be, it's a flat-out classic straight out of the gate, using the limited graphics of the time to transform what was essentially a tile-moving game of reflex and skill into a cartoon representation of nature survival that remains oddly compelling to this day. Just the idea of a poor tiny frog trying to navigate a busy freeway is a visceral image, and it gets you immediately invested in the action and seeing your specific arrangement of green pixels prevail. Frogger is one of Konami's signature masterpieces and one of the all-time legendary arcade classics. Number 1. Castlevania: Symphony of the Night. The Castlevania franchise is probably Konami's signature achievement in terms of game series, and its characters and overall setting have endured the longest and are as close as they've come to outright inventing an entire genre that can't be easily detached from the franchise itself. Think Capcom's relationship to Mega Man and or Street Fighter, that's Konami and Castlevania. Gamers have been following the saga of the Belmont family for over 30 years across dozens of games, but to date, nothing has managed to fully eclipse the game-changing release of Symphony of the Night. At a time when other series were making ill-advised leaps to 3D, whether it was warranted or not, Konami opted to make the biggest traditional Castlevania game ever with a sprawling open exploration castle to platform through and backtrack heavy design inspired by earlier landmarks like Metroid and their own Simon's Quest. The result is a game that's still the benchmark for the entire series and possibly even genre after all these years. A masterpiece that may never be equaled either in historical importance or actual quality. And that's why Castlevania Symphony of the Night is the best Konami game ever made. And that's the list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell us about it in the comments and suggest other lists you might like to see. Remember to like, subscribe, share with all your friends, and please consider donating to the moviebob Patreon to support this and other series like it. Hey gang, here's a question that keeps coming up. If your handle is moviebob, where are your movie reviews? Well, my old reviews are in a lot of places. You'll find many of them on my YouTube channel, but you'll find the brand new ones on geek.com, an awesome site that's also your one-stop news source for science, TV, gaming, technology, nerd culture, the works. You can find all my reviews directly by going to geek.com/author/bchipman, because that's my real name, and you can get regular updates on all my reviews and all of geek.com's other great content by signing up for their kick-ass newsletter at subscribe.geek.com. geek.com. And don't forget to also subscribe to the geek.com YouTube channel, where you'll find the videos that accompany my reviews and tons of other great content too. Remember, that's geek.com, the geek.com newsletter, and geek.com on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss out on all the latest moviebob reviews. You can also check out my own new website, moviebob Central, where you'll find my blog, links to all my work, and shop for my books, ebooks, and future moviebob products. And please remember to like these videos, share them with all of your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching another moviebob production.